Next order of business is to discuss and see if we want to take any action on the high school synthetic field project. I think everybody knows school department is working on private fundraising to convert the football field over to, I think the prices that they're looking at is about 1.8 million, something like that. In any event, it's private fundraising. The fields last between 8 and 12 years, and then the surface, the entire field doesn't need to be redone, but the surface needs to be redone and some other work. And my understanding is that's about $800,000 to $1 million. There's talk about creating a fund to try to build up a reserve so that the field, so that private funds again can support the work. I brought this forward for discussion tonight because the school committee, I think, has been clear from what I saw that they agree that, in 8 or 10 years or whatever it is, that town funds shouldn't be used. It should be private funds again, be raising, be raised to do that work if they decide to go ahead with this project, because it's not a given yet. They don't even know if they can raise the money. In any event, I thought it might be appropriate, given what we know about the fiscal outlook and the way revenue has grown over the years, that we might, we'll have a discussion on it, but that we might want to send a letter expressing our concern and our opinion that it's going to be very difficult with revenue growth as we've seen it, even in 8 to 10 years, to be able to come up with $1 million, give or take, out of the operating budget to do that work. So I personally don't have an opinion on the fields. I'm more concerned about the financial impact that it's going to have on the operating, not our budget, the whole town budget. When it comes forward. So I don't know if anybody had any opinions on the fields or anything like that. But
I just have a technical question that perhaps the manager could help me with. When it comes to town-owned property, where are the lines, Dan, of authority versus what this is entrusted to the school committee versus, I know much of the town land, as I recall, under the Town Manager Act, you're actually responsible for its operations. Right. Where are those lines start and stop?
The charter basically says that I'm responsible for all the properties. But when we get into the question of program, I defer it to the school. I defer it to parks. There's also parkland, whether it's parkland or there's no black and white. There's a lot of gray areas. I've always taken the position that a project of this, if it's something that the school department wants to take on, I defer to them. Very similar to when one of the schools decides they want to do a playground for themselves, or they want to make some sort of improvement, like at Patton School, for instance. I try not to intercede and say, well, no, that's not going to happen. I get to decide yes or no. This is something that they did consult with me on, and I took the position that if they feel that this is something that there is public support for, it certainly is an improvement based upon the amount of play that this will get. That if they feel they can marshal the resources and get it accomplished, then it's my job to accommodate that, as it is Mrs. Snell's job, because she's ultimately responsible for maintaining it, to work with the school folks as well, as we would again with any other.
Kind of like putting lights on the softball fields. And
that's right. If somebody comes to us and say they want to do softball lights, well, we work with them.
Okay, I guess then my next observation is I'm not sure where people in the athletic facilities field of work are coming down on the artificial fields versus a well-maintained, well-funded turf field. I know there was, over the past several years, there's been some controversy over the use of those, if you will, fake fields. But I'm sure from the work of the athletic director, et cetera, they'll work them way through those issues. The only issue I would have here is if they're going to construct a new facility, even with private money, I would hope the financing scheme long-term has a capital reserve fund. And perhaps instead of sending a letter at this point, perhaps we could ask the manager to just sit with the superintendent and ask for a copy of that. What's the finance plan? Because certainly if this is used as much as it's envisioned to be used, it will generate a tremendous amount of money for a revolving fund of some type, and I would anticipate some percentage of that would be put in a capital reserve fund, because there is ongoing maintenance, and then as you've pointed out, at some point in the future you have to do a much larger scale replacement. So I think that would be, I don't have enough information, frankly, other than the one evening I happened to tune in and see a bit of the briefing. But I think that would be a decent spot, so that we make sure if they're going to fund it, as I understand they are, that they also plan for the future and fund the reserve.
Okay, we can start there. Are we okay with that, or any other comments?
Well, I'm just concerned about a big capital. This is wholly different than what the town has traditionally done. Town-supported turf fields, which have lasted for long periods of time. Some of them have received some renovation, but not at anything approaching this kind of magnitude of cost. And I agree with comments that have been made that, X number of years down the road, I don't think there can be any advance expectation that the town will simply step forward and fund whatever major rejuvenation, for lack of a better word, is necessary. As far as the tool, employing this type of athletic field rather than a turf one, I guess I am willing to largely allow the school department to make its own decisions, but I'm very concerned about the downstream costs and to make sure that that's addressed.
Okay, so why don't we ask the manager to talk with the superintendent, see if they have a plan that's incorporated in there, and have them get back to us, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think at some point we get that information, but I agree with you. On some point, we want to put that in writing and have that on the record for future boards to clearly understand.
Right.
I just want to say I tuned into the same school committee meeting, and that discussion went off quite some time. So if you get a chance, take a look at it, because there was a ton more information than I ever possibly could have imagined for a turf field. But that discussion of funding and the maintenance, as I understand it, the amount of maintenance needed for these fields is actually reasonably costly. It's not necessarily an inexpensive proposition. It may even be an offset to a grass field. But that being said, I think I agree with all the previous comments that were made.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead that way, and we'll defer action, if any, until we get that information. Okay.